right, welcome back. I'm Jana with Pearl Together. This is Ambah O'Brien, and we're here to tell you about the Caladenia Mystery Knit Along clue number 2.
Woo. So everyone's had their go at bobbles. I hope they've gone well. We're recording this in the past, so we don't know how your week went, but probably have been chatting about it on the various forums and chats. Yeah, so clue 2, we're changing it up.
Yes, I like Mosaic. I do. I just think it's a fantastic way to put in some color work, but it's easy because you're only using one color across a row and back. And it's, it's just a simple concept, but you can do so much with it.
Yeah.
And you've done a fantastic way of incorporating that and putting in some color work that's some interesting geometric designs. And I think it's a lot of fun. It's a little addicting, I think, to knit Mosaic. You're like, oh, I just want to do 2 more rows. I just want to change colors one more time and do 2 more rows. And then pretty soon it's 2 in the morning.
Yeah, especially as you see the pattern starting to grow, and it's exciting. And because this particular one is all garter stitch, it's essentially just garter stitch, and you're slipping a few stitches. The hardest part is making sure that you keep the yarn on the wrong side row. I think is the hardest. You want to keep the yarn bring the yarn to the back when you're slipping the stitches. So,
however, and you bring the yarn forward when you're going back on the wrong side. However, if you do mess up, I have some tips down in the following technique video that will show you how you can fix that if you come across a stitch and the yarn float is on the wrong side.
Fantastic.
You can fix it. You don't have to rip back. You can fix it. Or the other thing I discovered when I knitted it myself was how to fix it if, like, let's say you have 3 of one color and 2 of another color. Like, let's say you have 3 dark stitches and 2 light stitches, but you've miscounted and now you only have 2 and 3. But I can show you how to shift it without ripping back.
Fantastic. Because it's just garter stitch. It's easy to fix up your mistakes, and it's good. Yeah, good. So don't be afraid of it.
But it's much easier than like Fair Isle or 2 or 3 color work. It's Mosaic it's not difficult. It just requires a little bit of attention. That's all.
Yeah.
So your pattern is fun and it's intriguing, and you just want to do another couple rows before you go to bed or before you put it down. A couple more.
So this time you'll be using the 2 really strongly contrasting colors too. So if you're using 4 colors, color 3 will be a strong contrast to color 1. And I use that really deep plum magenta orchid color, I think of it as. I don't actually know the name of it, but and you've got that dark grayish brown, haven't you?
On mine, I'm using, my first color was this lighter one with the speckles. See, the darker speckles. And then what's really neat, the way Terina dyed these, is the speckles in here tie in really well to that darker brown that I have, which is this one. And it's so a very tonal, so those contrast very strongly, and that makes the pattern, really stand out. That's the point of having that strong contrast that you mentioned a couple of times in your blog post when people are choosing colors, is because of the Mosaic and having the pattern in the background so different from one another to be able to, so the pattern's recognizable. Sure. So have fun with that this week. And as always, if people have questions, they can hop over to the groups or leave a comment down below and we'll take care of it. All right. Thanks for joining me again this week.
Okay, welcome to clue number 2. We're moving into this mosaic section. I really like mosaic color work. It is stranded color work, meaning that you're carrying along strands behind. However, you only work with 1 color per row, so that's convenient and it's not super difficult, but you do need to pay attention. Now, if this is your first time working with a mosaic chart, I do have a video specific to reading a mosaic chart. Okay, if you'll notice, Ambah on the chart has given us the odd numbered rows on the chart. And the first color shown at the very beginning of whatever line you're looking at is the primary color of that row. So you'll notice, like, I'm on row 13. It starts out with the darker color. For me, this is this lovely variegated brown. And so that's the color that I'm going to carry and I'm going to knit with this whole row. So for those of you that are new to reading a mosaic chart, as I mentioned, the first stitch indicates the primary color for that entire row. Then when you come to a color that is not the one you're knitting with, you're going to slip that as if to purl, and you have your yarn along the back. So I'm slipping these 3 as if to purl, and then I'm just going to continue knitting, making sure that I'm leaving enough looseness back here where I'm carrying this strand across the back. Let me double check my count here to make sure that I've done this correctly. Whoops. See, and this is really easy to tink back. Just make sure you tink back the ones you slipped without twisting them. I should have knitted another one, I think. Let's see, that's deceiving just because it's a lighter color, but it has a speckle. So I have to be careful about those. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I needed 11. All right, so slip as if to purl, do those 3, and that's how you know the ones that are not the color of what you're knitting indicated on the chart are the ones that will be slipped. The first tip I have for you is when you're changing colors and you want to carry your color that you're not using up the side. And so now I'm going to switch to using this lighter color, and I always, you can twist them and alternate them as you go. I usually like to keep the lighter color in the front. You can see where I've done that as we've gone along, where the lighter color is usually on the left or on the front side. You can alternate that if you want to, if you prefer that pattern or that look to the side. But the point here is just to make sure that you carry those colors up very loosely so that when you block your shawl, you'll have enough give and stretch on the edge. So this one I maybe should have twisted that in a little bit right there. I can always, cut it and weave it in, or I'll decide what to do about that later. Or I may just leave it. If you're going to carry it up more than 2 rows, you may want to twist them on the edge. I probably should have done that there, but that's okay. So I'm going to bring this lighter color in the front and I'm going to begin knitting with it. However, I just want to make sure that when I do that first knit stitch, I'm keeping everything pretty loose, because you definitely don't want things to pucker on the edge. So just, that'd be my first tip, is just to make sure that you have enough stretch and space when you block it, that it's not going to be too tight on your edge. And so I'm just going along, and I wanted to show you here specifically, when you come to a point where you're going to be slipping 3 stitches, you want to loosely carry this along the back. So now I'm going to knit a whole bunch in a row, and I want to make sure that when I pull this across, I'm leaving, I don't want it loose and sloppy, but I want to make sure that these are spaced appropriately. Usually the general rule is at least a needle width apart, so that it's not going to pucker and it's not going to draw in my shawl. So you just want to make sure of that when you're going along and you're carrying your floats behind, that you're not pulling too much. And so to ensure that spacing, make sure that you're spacing your stitches along that you've already done, and so that when you bring that yarn behind, it will be the appropriate length, not to cause any puckering. And we're going to be sure to repeat the number of stitches that are between the black lines on the chart. I'll show you a couple of things when I get to the end of the row, and we'll go back the other direction. If you're slipping something, you're slipping with yarn and back and you're knitting anyway, you want to always slip as if to purl with the yarn and back, and then you're carrying the floats along the back. So this is the right side of my work, and all of our carrying along things will be on the wrong side or on the back. And I'll show you how we're going to do that when we come back the other direction. We'll make sure that we carry our yarn along the correct on the wrong side when we're knitting on the wrong side, or when we're working the stitches on the wrong side. All right, when we're working back the other direction with the wrong side facing us and we come to stitches that need to be slipped, these are all the even numbered rows where you're going to knit the ones that match the color that you're carrying along, that you're working with, and then you're slipping the ones that are opposite. And you can tell there's our float from when we worked the right side when we came back. So we need to do the same kind of thing, but we don't want to have a float on the right side of our work. So we're going to slip everything with the yarn in front. So simply bring that forward as if you're going to purl, slip these next 3 stitches, being mindful of your tension. So bring them onto the right needle and then kind of space them out. And then we're going to take the yarn to the back again. Now this is where you can kind of get in trouble by pulling, because you don't want to yank everything toward this left-hand needle. And then you're going to knit. So just make sure that you keep everything nice and loose, but not too gappy. But you can see where you don't want to pull that tight and have that float bunch these 3 stitches together. But that's how you're going to bring your yarn to the front to keep the float on the wrong side of your work. Okay, another thing to watch out for is that when you're on the right side of your work, that the floats should all be on the back, right? You should have all the floats being on the wrong side of the work. So if you come up to a stitch that has a float in the front, this happens sometimes, it's not that big of a deal, but this strand right here that's going across, that's not supposed to be there. That would have been a situation where when I was knitting on the back side, I should have brought my yarn forward and then knitted that stitch to keep the float on the correct side of my work, or on the wrong side of my work. So it's not a big deal. I don't have to tink. All I need to do is transfer this stitch. Before I knit it, I'm going to transfer it over to the right hand needle. I'm just going to go under and get a hold of this strand right here and put it on the left needle. It's not a big deal. I'm just going to move this stitch over to the right, and I'm going to pick up that strand with my left hand needle. Okay, put the stitch back over to the right, and this might happen instead of one single white stitch. Maybe there's 2 or 3 that are like this that need to be moved. And then just simply lift that float up and over it and put it on the back. And there you go. You fixed your problem. And that could be the case whether it's one single stitch or whether it's a group of 2 or 3. It's easy enough to just lift that float up and over and put it on the back. All right, another thing to be mindful of is with Mosaic, that a stitch will not be slipped more than 2 rows. So for example, I can see that this white stitch has come from way down here. So if I get off somewhere in the sequence of things where I have, 3, 1, 1, 1, 3, if I get off somewhere, I can double check myself knowing that if I'm off on my chart to the point where this is going to be slipped again, I know that can't be the case because it stretches that out too much. So that's another thing to watch for is that won't ever happen. You're not going to stretch a stitch up, slip it up more than 2 rows. So I know that wherever I am in this chart, that's going to have to be a knit, this row, because I'm holding the white. So I hope that helps you double check yourself as you're reading the chart or the written instructions. What to do if you come up to a stitch that is wrong, like that this brown one should totally be this white one. This white one should have been slipped, but instead I knitted it on the other previous row, and I know for a fact that it should be because I've double checked my pattern, I've double checked my chart, I've double checked all the counts and the sequences, and I know that it's wrong. So when I'm stressing double check is because you don't want to do this until you're absolutely sure. So I know that after I've knitted 3, these 2 are slipped, this one should have been white. So all I'm going to do is go under here and pick this up. I'm going to drop the brown stitch and let it become a float. Then I'm going to put that back up. And because I know that it should be this way, and I'm going to knit this stitch, but this float wasn't supposed to go across the back of this brown one and this white one. So what's happened is I should have knitted this one on the last row. So all I'm going to do is pick up the float behind, and I'm going to create that into a knit stitch. There you go. And now I know it's correct. So I can go ahead and slip this one and knit the next. Okay, I'll show you that again, don't worry, and especially I'll show you if you have to shift, if you know that you've made a mistake with more than 1 stitch and maybe you're off just 1 in your column because you're checking how things look, right? And that this is like a pyramid. And you're checking how those stitches are stacked upon one another in previous rows. So in just a moment, I'll show you how you can shift things to make it work. Okay, here's another example of what I was talking about earlier. Now I'm on the wrong side of my work, and so I'm going back. I've done my knit 1, knit front back, and now I'm just going along knitting the stitches that match the yarn that I'm holding, and I'm supposed to be slipping the ones that don't match. Now, but one thing I've noticed here as I've come along is that I don't have a float on this side. There should be a white strand coming across from my previous row when I knitted this and carried the strand across and then knitted this next one. And sure enough, there it is right there in the front. So I need to lift that up and over so it doesn't make a mistake on the right side of my work. So that's super easy. Just go in and grab that and shuffle it all the way over past the stitches that you want it to be. Bring those stitches over to the right needle and just kind of settle everything down, And there you've brought the float up to the front. Now you can work those stitches as you're supposed to. So bring your yarn to the front, slip those two, bring your yarn to the back, and now you have your float on the correct side again, and we can carry on knitting those. All right, let me go back to another issue, previous mistake. Now I know with my pattern here, I have 2 brown ones. In this section of 5, I have 2, 1, 2. And then we have 3 white ones, and we have 1, 1, 1. 3 white ones. Now here, I should have 2, 1, 2. These 2 white stitches should be brown. I made this mistake on purpose so that I could show you how to fix it. Now, if I'm this close to an end, yeah, you could tink back. It's not that far to go back and fix those. But if you're all the way over here in the middle of your work, you don't want to do that. I mean, you could, but that's a big time issue, and you don't necessarily want to do that. So these need to be knits. These 2 stitches here should be brown knit stitches, or yeah, they would have been knit stitches on this side. So these 2 white stitches here, the first ones should be brown and look like that. So they should be brown purl stitches on this side of my work. So all I'm going to do is simply take one of them off, get a hold of the brown loop at the base of that stitch, and go ahead and let this white one become a float for now. Okay? Then I'm going to go to the next one and do the same thing. And I know that looks big and awkward, and it is, but I'm going to go ahead and get a hold of that brown stitch there. Okay, so these are brown stitches now, and they should be just slipped, right? I should have just slipped them. And I know you have this big float right here. We're going to just kind of ease that in. So we're still going to bring our yarn to the front, and we're going to slip these as they should be. And then I'm going to bring my yarn around to the back, and I'm going to knit this. Now, I know you still have that big icky float right there. That's super awkward. But what I'm going to do is take a little darning needle, and I'm just going to go in and ease that. I'm going to distribute that looseness throughout these other stitches, and I'm just going to work it in and take care of that little bit of ease. So I don't have a darning needle with me right handy, but I do have this little pin. So I'm just going to be really careful not to split my stitches as I just go in and ease that on down. So that takes a little bit of work, but I still think, you know, easing this through here and fixing this float is still going to be a little less time consuming than if you would have gone and tinked all that back, particularly if you're in the middle of a long row. Okay, so I'll just work that in. And also that's going to smooth out with tension and blocking. And then I'm just going to carry on here. Slipping, whoops, see now I forgot to bring my yarn to the front like I should have, and I would have had the same problem. So slip those 2, take your yarn to the back, and then carry on knitting. And I can also ease up that float here with these next knit stitches by just giving them a little tug, making them a little bit, so I can just distribute that, okay? Now, that might mess with your tension. If you have too many situations like that, that might mess with your tension because you weren't necessarily intending to slip those. So try to minimize that, but it'll be fine for now. If you find yourself having that problem over and over, then you may want to tink back if you have a row with several of those mishaps, because that will affect your tension overall. But if you just have one, you can go through and ease that and even that out. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is, let's say, for example, that we have 2 dark stitches here and 1 here, and we want to reverse this. So we have 1 light one and 2 dark ones, because you made a mistake somewhere and you need to shift the 2 dark ones over 1 stitch and have this light one here in the beginning. So let me show you how I would accomplish that. I would take all 3 stitches to my right hand needle, and then I would take out the first one. So now you have this longer float. I would shuffle everything back. Then what our goal is to make this dark stitch here into a lighter colored knit, or actually a purl stitch. So I'm just going to get the float up on my left hand needle and make that darker one into a purl stitch by moving it back to the left and then ducking that under and grabbing it like that. And there you go. So now I've just reversed that, haven't I? So you have enough slack to do that because you have the float. So you can, you know, reorient those and change those around. So now I know that that's wrong, but I wanted to do it for the sake of the demonstration or the video. So now I'm going to put it back by just doing the opposite. I'm going to go back underneath that brown stitch underneath, pick it up, get my float clear and free. I have 2 that I need to slip to continue with my pattern because I have 2 dark, 1 light, 2 dark. And now this one needs to be the light stitch. So I'll put that back onto the right hand needle, grab the float underneath, put it over to the left and just duck under, or use a crochet hook if you like. And then there's my light colored stitch in the correct spot. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, knitters, I hope you're enjoying the Mystery Knit Along so far and that you're finding value and these videos to be helpful. If so, consider hitting the thumbs up and subscribing to the channel, and we'll see you next week for more. Thanks for watching.